Welcome to Grow Overload. And AMD has came out with a community blog post about the gaming performance of the Ryzen 9000 series processors. Hopefully, this will explain something to us, or will it just cause more confusion and be a reason that AMD should actually start making some changes in marketing and the testing sequence that they have? So let's jump over to the blog post here, and I'm hoping this is big enough for you guys. I did increase the text size here, and they talk about a little bit about Zen5 here. I will leave the blog posted below if you care to go through it yourself. But they say here, and while Zen5 is delivering leadership performance across content creation, productivity, AI applications, we've heard from the community that they, with good reason, expected even more gaming performance from the Ryzen 9000 series than initial reviews showed. I would say yes, we did want more of that. So they talk about community feedback is important, and they have two relevant updates for us. Yay, we get some updates. Okay, AMD. Why AMD generated gaming data differs from reviewers' data. This should be good. For our Ryzen 9000 launch, AMD internal labs generated data that showed a 9% average generational uplift in 1080p gaming versus the Ryzen 7000 series, an average of 6% higher performance across 30 games when compared to the competition's best. Now, after this, AMD goes through and talks a little bit more about not all reviewers. But let's first talk about this. AMD, can we have, I know that's in your slides, but here you should have listed all the games and then what year they were released. They need to have some of the most popular games as well as some of the latest released games and everything else. If I recall, that is not the case. They only have a few games for the latest releases and stuff out of this, and so I think that this is kind of, you're only testing 30 games and you have a whole lab that's dedicated to this. I mean, this is not looking good, AMD, off the start. Yeah, you may only want to show 30 games, but you should be testing, 60, 80, 100 games, and your lab should be set up for that. Some of in my day job, I do software is what I work on, and tests are part of that. And I've worked in testing scenarios and helped to design them, and you never have enough tests, and you're always looking to gain that edge to make more tests and better tests and make sure that you have relevant data so that you don't introduce or have a problem like AMD's going through like this. And it's not saying that you're going to be able to prevent it, but it is saying that there is time that AMD needs to put in now that we can clearly see that they've either had somebody let go or whatever else, or somebody left that clearly had a better pulse on this prior generations of Zen than where they are now. And they either need to get that person back and pay them whatever it takes, or they need to start cleaning out people with these bad ideas that they're going with based upon the last marketing slides. So AMD continues, not all reviews are seeing these results, and this reflects the complexity of high-performance PC testing today. Given the number of systems and software variables, there are several factors that may be creating differences in some Ryzen 9000 series for reviews. Okay, we'll go through these, but keep in mind, AMD, everyone's going to have a different setup, and everyone's going to be expecting a uplift if they already have a 7000 series or want an uplift. And these reviewers getting different data and different scenarios, that should be taken with a high regard of information to AMD to be able to fix and figure out why this is a difference and why the numbers are so different. You should do a better job of posting your exact specs you're testing with and putting them out there so that we can fully try to replicate those. I'm sure that there are reviewers out there or somebody like me that when they do get a CPU or a problem are going to look into this and try to figure out what is the reason, probably give you a lot of data, out there, especially in a video or something, that you can then take, and maybe even somebody will be helpful enough to ask for it. I know if somebody asks me to test something, I'm more than willing to test it and give them data of what my testing is, and so that they can make a better product. My goal is to have better products out there, and this should have been the approach that you are taking today instead of this. Um, well, we're only so far in. So remember, AMD has said 9% generational uplift in 1080p versus Ryzen 7000. So we're going to come back to that. And then they have an average of 6% higher. So when compared to the competition's best. So just remember 9% over 7,000. But let's get into some of the specific factors AMD thinks. AMD's game testing suite includes a broad set of esports, AAA, and popular older games, which are a combination of CPU and GPU bound titles. Game performance conclusions can be influenced significantly by the makeup of the test suite. That's true. That's not completely there, but I'm sure you're using in-game benchmarks, which are fine. I think that is a operation, that is a way to benchmark things. There should be nothing wrong with that. Some reviewers decide to do in-game testing and in-game benchmarks, and while automation is fine, you have to remember that automation does come with some oversight, especially if you're trying to automate and you have, keyboard inputs. There will be a detriment to that if you're using a testing software to drive other software. There's a detriment to there. That's probably another topic for another day. I can go into that way too long. Performance testing, I've done that. I've done stuff like that too with overhead and UI tests and driving stuff. So there's a lot in my background I have done, but this is something, yeah, it's a true statement. However you test, there's going to be different variables there, but that those same variables that are happening at the one system are happening at the older system too. So you should still see that uplift overall, unless there's something that architectural wise that does not take that into consideration and cannot compute that. Now, AMD tested Intel configurations using comparable DDR5 memory as well as Intel default settings, baseline power profile, which can have a small impact on gaming performance. AMD, side note on this one, just drop your testing against Intel. We don't trust you anymore on this. You've had now 3 bad batches of things. You got to stop testing against your competition and posting those as a reason to upgrade to your processors. No one's going to care. I mean, Intel has their own issues already right now. But you saying this, I mean, just if you're going to test anything, AMD, on Intel, and I will say this much, if you're going to and release it, it has to be the full power, the fastest memory possible, and you go with your standards of what you are authorizing and releasing. That's how you're going to test it going forward, just so that we can somewhat believe you, because um, any Intel testing, AMD, like for this one, I didn't even look at the Intel testing for their releases based upon the last 2 issues they've had with benchmarking with their GPUs and CPUs. Um, and so I just did not care about AMD's Intel comparison, and this shows you that you're incompetent in being able to do that. Your testing team is ran by somebody that needs to be replaced. I don't know where these decisions are being made, but they have to stop, and that means that I hate for having people lose their job. I think there's a lot of good people out there that do it, but if somebody's not doing their job, which you're clearly stating in this blog post, you have to get rid of them, and they cannot be making decisions like this. Maybe you can transfer them to a different unit that has no public-facing sides of things or gets no data out there, or retrain them. But this is just ridiculous of how you're doing this. So AMD, the next bullet point, let's jump into that. AMD also tests with Windows virtualization VBS enabled. This is a default behavior in Windows, and Microsoft's recommending activating VBS to improve security. However, it can affect gaming performance. Now, this may actually be a interesting tidbit that's just going to make charts even more complex for any reviewers that want to do it. But I can see where they're coming from. This goes to a Windows side gripe I have, but we're focused on AMD here. I'm trying to give AMD the benefit of doubt. I really wanted Zen5 and I think for server this is going to be just a monstrous architecture. But I think how they're releasing this we need to stay focused on the consumer on this side and actually call them out for what they're doing here, because this blog post shows that you're trying to be petty in this instead of trying to correct and make the issue better. That's just my point of view on it. The Zen 5 will continue here. The Zen 5 architecture incorporates a wider branch predictor capacity than prior Zen generations. Our automated test methodology runs in admin mode, which produces results that reflect branch prediction code optimizations not present in the version of Windows reviewers used to test the 9000 series. We'll have a further update on assessing performance for the users below. So, a couple things on this. Now, I wanted to do a video on this last night. I'll explain later in the video, but I had a little issue, so I didn't get to all my content I wanted to create yesterday. But AMD, like, reviewers are going to be reviewing it underneath a normal mode where you set up Windows, and that's where you need to be reviewing it as well. I get Windows is I've had my qualms about a scheduler for many years, so I'm not new to the scheduler problems and Windows kernel problems out there, but you have to work with Microsoft to get those out and have those prepped in an update and if requires an update to be down the line or whatever, that has to be said in the reviewer, saying this is where we are today. It's there. It's a Windows update requires it. We get it. There's kernel patches that go into the Linux kernel all the time for CPUs and stuff. The same thing needs to happen for Windows to get this stuff fixed. It makes sense, but you have to tell that to not only reviewers but also users coming out that this is where items will be for the future of these processors, is that these updates are required to fully enable the performance, and here's what we think it's going to be delivered. Now, no one's going to believe you based upon your last couple times of releasing the performance metrics, but at least we'll know that there could be a performance uplift based upon your flawed benchmarks in the past. So here we go. In light of this, the Ryzen 9000 series delivers leadership performance across content creation, productivity, and AI applications. On a generational basis, Ryzen 9000 delivers about a 10% improvement in productivity and creative loads, 25% improvement in AI workloads, and a 5 to 8% improvement in gaming over the Ryzen 7000 series. So does this mean that this number is right, or is this just 1080p? And this includes all resolutions. I'm curious. You did not qualify this. This is something that this is I see as marketing speak. You're trying to sell me something without explaining it, right? You tell me it's a 9% generational uplift here in 1080p gaming versus the Ryzen 7000 series, and then down here you're telling me it's only 5 to 8% improvement in gaming over the Ryzen 7000 series. So which one is it? Now, as you scale up, right, that's more GPU bound than CPU bound, but why this difference here? And wouldn't have been 5 to 9% then, or 5 to you said average of 9%, so wouldn't this be higher? I'm very confused on where you were on this. So your blog post isn't even consistent within it, which is a problem. And this is where I'm guessing somebody in marketing is doing this, and this is where somebody in the C-level suites and VPs and stuff need to start saying this cannot happen. We are cleaning this mess up, and the longer it takes to clean up, the more it goes up the chain to CEOs, and stuff, CTOs, stuff, CMOs, stuff like this, where they need to take bigger responsibility. Or guess where it's going to eventually lead to is that you let this happen underneath your watch. You did not change the leadership when it needed to be changed, and you let this happen, so it falls on your desk. And that's for those C-level suites. Guess what? When it lands on your desk, it's never. You're showing the door pretty quick then when it gets bad enough. So just keep that in mind. You can be running a company making a lot of money, but if you're getting a bad taste in everybody's mouth and everyone's holding their nose to buy your product, you may hurt a segment of the market not realizing it, and then it's not going to be uh, right then and there that you come up with the problem, but it will be it will happen to be that you decided not to correct the problem, and it ends up being something on your desk because you did not clean it up. You're not Jensen from NVIDIA, where he has a amazing ability to work the room and update consumers and still keep and still have a dominant platform just because he knows that he can deliver the best and beat everybody, but also give the consumers enough of what they want so they want to still go out and buy his product. He does support in little areas. AMD, you're not there. Intel's not there, right? They're not a Jensen that can do this and have a leadership role like he has that can be so significant. You can try to be like them, but you got to work your way up, right? NVIDIA is a brand, whether people like it or not, that is a significant brand in gaming still to this day. No matter how much they switch to AI, they're still a dominant player, and they still give enough of what the gamers want to be a dominant player, right? That's what they do. They can change the market. They can do whatever they want. So let's continue before I keep going on NVIDIA here. I mean, I like what Jensen does. I mean, he's impressive. Another thing on this, right? We'll get into it in a second here on the admin account. That's just dumb. That's just poor testing. That's bad. That's whoever decided that. That's just stupid. When comparing to the competition using optimal settings, header memory, and extreme power delivery profile like competition and Windows 11 24H2 both see detail below. We see double-digit lead over the Ryzen 9000 in productivity and creator applications, about 30% lead in AI workloads, parity on gaming using the most popular games included in the reviews. I thought, AMD, you said here that you said parity in gaming, but isn't it up here? They saw just a small impact in performance it has. And didn't your slides say that you were beating Intel? I'm just trying to go through and remember that Intel. So, or, against Intel. Here, AMD, you're kind of mincing here. You're not understanding kind of, you just need to drop the whole thing. Now, the extreme profile, optimal settings, you should be using optimal settings for Intel anyways. You should be putting Intel in the best light and your processors in the worst light as much as possible, and then showing it off as your processor still beating Intel with what they have. And then, when you release the processors and you have reviewers can go wild and they can see how much your processor improved. You have lost the benefit of the doubt. So here we go. Further enabling advanced Zen5 architectures. So for Zen5 users, here's our recommendation to unlock performance. Optimized AMD specific branch tradition code will be available in Windows 11 24H2 and preview through Windows Insiders. Get that build by downloading ISO here. Now, only get this if you want to deal with the Windows Insider program. So I will make that clarification. I have the Windows Insider on my laptop. I do not put it on my production machine here because, well, there can be issues. While performance may vary based on the application configurations, here's a sample of what you can expect to see in 24H2 on the Ryzen 9000 desktop processors. Now, I will say this. I only take this with a very small grain of salt that's split in half. So, but they are seeing an uplift here. You will see an uplift though on other Zen processors. You will. AMD says right here, right? Zen 5 will see the biggest boost, but Windows Update will improve performance for Zen 4 and Zen 3 as well. We're collaborating with Microsoft to roll out this optional update to all Windows 11 users soon. So there is no change in Cinebench, there's no change in Watchdogs, but there is a change of 3, 7, 13%, and then 6% in Procron Office. So you will probably get a uplift here. Now, there's been some demonstration of this through hardware's unbox testing already. They just did an admin account, which I don't recommend people go do. That's full access to the user. But I think AMD needs to get their drivers, their chipset drivers and stuff all figured out. They need to work with Microsoft, and they need to get this stuff done. Now, here's where they go through and we start talking into AMD's acknowledgments. So, we want to acknowledge and thank the reviewer community for all their testing and feedback. Many of their observations are helping accelerate our work in developing future Ryzen firmware updates that will benefit 9,000 users. We also want to hear from the community of your experiences with the Ryzen 9000 series. As we've done with every new architecture, we will continue to use the community and press feedback to tune and optimize and deliver the absolute best possible performance to Ryzen customers. This paragraph right here, AMD, should have been the first one. Maybe with some tweaks. But I'll jump back here. That is the blog post for AMD here. But AMD, I really wanted the Zen5 to just be amazing on the desktop, right? I'm looking for a new computer, right? I'm looking to upgrade. And I really wanted to knock it out of the park. I'm like, oh, I'll get some X3D in my system, when they come out, and I'll be ready to roll here. It'll be a fun experience, a nice little upgrade for me, and that's what I was looking forward to. Now, I'm not impressed with what Intel has done, and for me personally, right, with the 13th and 14th gen of what they're going through, Intel is kind of got a bad taste in my mouth until they show that they are committed to fixing this to customers. I still think that they need to offer these 13th, 14th gens a little bit more. That's me, but we can go in a different video here. This is focused on this gaming performance update from AMD, and I don't know where AMD got the idea that they needed to add in all this and try to defend themselves. What they needed to do was humble themselves. And this blog post should have said, we messed up. It should have started with the bottom, right? Where we want to thank the reviewing community. We want to thank the community people that buy our processors and are telling us that there's something wrong, that there was some inaccuracies in our data, and we will try to open source get out as much of our testing methodology and our data as possible, so that those out there that have those capabilities of doing this can see where we screwed up, so that we can make better testing, because obviously we have an issue here that needs to get fixed. We had bad methodology. We decided to run in an admin account, which is the dumbest testing thing. You always test as a user is going to test. Right, you run your software as a user is going to run the software. If you're developing something, you run the hardware as the user is going to run the hardware, right? And that's not going to be as a local admin. That's just not how it is. If you saw that, you should have been working with Microsoft right away, seeing what the hell is wrong and why the heck this is not fixed yet. And I just don't understand where AMD got this whole methodology there. You should have a team testing, 100 games. Taking games. You should have at least 3 games from each of the last 3 years, making that 9 or 10 games there, so that you have even though that you might go back to a Fortnite or some of these older games, that everyone loves to play. I get that. You may see a nice uplift here, but you also have to be taking some of these newer games as well and throwing them into your test suite so we know where they're at. And I don't get why AMD just didn't go through and decide this is what we're going to do with it. And they came out here, in my opinion, whining a little bit about everything that's going on instead of taking responsibility for it and humbling themselves before everybody and just saying, yeah, we screwed up. You're kind of taking a leaf out of Intel's book here, and it's not working well for Intel, and I don't think it's going to work well for AMD either. Like I said, I think these are going to be a monster processor, especially on the server side. They got some really good server side productivity side stuff that I'm really excited about. But for my scenario, I'm not looking just for a server-side CPU. I like to play games too every once in a while. So, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. I've rambled on long enough. I can go on about testing and how they screwed up over and over again. But leave Intel out of this, AMD. It's on you. You should not be comparing your processors to anybody. I mean, compare them to yourself, and even you screwed that up. So, I people need to get better at their job at AMD if you're going to keep them. I think that leadership needs to make a change to the leaders in this marketing and testing group to put in somebody better. I get it's going to cost you, AMD. It's going to cost you a lot of money to get in a good, and I mean good, tester. They're going to good testers to be able to set up a testing platform and say, this is how we're going to test it, this is how results are. To get something good takes a lot of effort and money. I get it. Nobody likes doing it. But I will, as somebody that writes code for a living, I want good tests, and I want to have them accurate as possible. And I make sure that I try to put in much effort in and make sure my squeaky wheel is known where I've been at, so that companies want to actually make sure their software is exceeding instead of under delivering to their customers. So that's where I'm at in this, and I hope that I get to see your comments below. Let me know your thoughts and everything. And until next time, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It really does help out the channel, and watching none of my videos does as well. And until next time, God bless.